Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the State of the University Address. We are going to do the presentation a little differently today in that there are going to be three opportunities for interaction. At the conclusion of my piece of this, which I hope is about 15 to 20 minutes from now, we will take questions or comments on the visioning project, the long-range plan, planning process, or related issues, because that's the main focus of what I'm going to be talking about. Then at the conclusion of Frank's presentation, he will take questions on anything related to the HLC visit or accreditation. That's going to be a main focus of what he's talking about. And then at the end, when we're both done, then we'll take questions on anything you want to talk about beyond those subjects. So let me tell you how we're going to do this. You got there, particularly for people that are watching this being live streamed, and at least from past history, there are more people watching it on their computer than there are watching it in this room. There's an option for them that they can send in questions. They can post questions on live stream. The second option is, whether you're here or there, you can use Twitter with the hashtag MSUChat to post questions. If you don't want to use either of those things for either the first piece or the second piece, you can write it on a card, hold them up anytime. Somebody will magically appear and take them. And then Suzanne Shaw is up at the back. She's our Vice President for Communications. She will then ask the questions that have been sent in through any of those three methods at the first break and at the second break. Then at the end, and Kishore's already told me he's on this, at the end, Kishore and anyone else that doesn't want to write or tweet their question can stand up and ask us anything you want. So that's our plan as we move forward today. As I said, my main focus of my part of the talk is going to be on strategic planning. But before I get to that, I did want to mention some of the highlights of the past 12 months. And there are 5 things I wanted to focus on. The first one, of course, is enrollment. Enrollment growth has been a primary focus since Frank and I took these jobs 4+ years ago. And so I would report back that our system enrollment is 24,735. That is an all-time high. Springfield campus enrollment also hit an all-time high, 22,800 plus students. Our system enrollment would have been even higher, but for the fact that West Plains lost 200 students. So they will be working to figure out how losing 13% of their credit hours and the tuition that generated impacts them. I suspect if you want to ask someone, is enrollment important, anyone on the West Plains campus could testify as to what that means. Enrollment is critically important. We have, if we break the big numbers down, this next slide shows that we have more graduate students, more international students, more out-of-state students, and more students of color than we've had in the last 4 years. In fact, those are all records. We have more students in those 4 categories than we have had in our history. We have our biggest freshman class since we became a selective admission university. Since 1995, we have 3,178 freshmen, up 377, or 13.5%. Students want to come here, and that's a good thing. As you have seen this week in our newspaper, all universities in our community and in our state are not growing, and so I am very pleased that we are growing in a tough time for universities. I tell our board always wants metrics. How are we going to measure what we're doing? How are we going to show that we're doing well? Here's my first answer to them. The most important metric of a healthy university is your enrollment growing? Do students want to come here? And we hit that mark this year. And so for all of you that were engaged in that and involved in that, faculty, staff, other students, well done. Students want to come here. Second, and this also has been as important and tied to the enrollment theme, and that is compensation. And we, again, improved compensation for all of our employees. We were able to do a 1.8% across-the-board raise. That is more than twice the rate of inflation last year. We were able to fund the second year the full professor incentive program. We were able to create an additional pool of money to improve the pay of many of our instructors. We, for the first time, and as a result of a staff senate initiative, we added a pool of money to each cost center to specifically work on improving staff salaries. And on top of that, we did hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity adjustments. And so, you know, last year we had $6 million new dollars, almost half of which came from enrollment growth, going back to the tie-in there. And slightly less than half went into improving the pay and benefits of our employees, and that does not count the equity adjustments made by departments. Another $800,000 was allocated to new faculty positions, and so well over half of our new money, probably 3/4 to 80%, went into personnel, and that's perfectly appropriate because personnel is how we operate the university through our faculty and staff. Third, we had a successful year in the state capitol. It seems like I spend almost all my time working on this piece of it, but we had a good year, and so that work paid off. We had a 1.5% increase in state appropriation. That was greater than inflation, so that was good. Our increase was larger than others because we met all our performance funding measures, and for the first time, the formula included an equity component. Equity means enrollment growth. So circling back around to point number one, enrollment matters. It impacted our state funding, and it let us get 1.5% increase rather than 1.3% increase. This year, I think it will have an even bigger impact because we expect a larger increase from the state and hence a larger equity component. And so, again, enrollment factors into that. Additionally, we had a general revenue bonding bill passed, which will allow the renovation of both Hill and Ellis Halls. At the Executive Board Committee meeting in October, we anticipate hiring an architect to begin the design of the renovation of Ellis, and we're excited about that. We received $2.25 million from the state in one-time money to help fund the construction of the Welcome Center. That was a 50-50 matching project. Next year, we'll be going after a 50-50 matching project for the construction of Glass Hall. And we received the second year of the OT money that had been withheld by the governor, and we understand that will again be in his budget for the third time. And so, very pleased with the year that we had in Jeff City. Fourth, we were successful in fundraising, bringing in over $19 million, making it the second best year that the foundation has ever had. And then finally, we improved our physical plant significantly by adding the Davis Harrington Welcome Center, the O'Reilly Clinical Health Sciences Center, 5 new science labs, completely renovating Pummel Hall, which, by the way, if you have not yet been in Pummel Hall, you need to walk through. It's unbelievable. And Carrie's Cafe opens here in a couple of weeks, and so that'll be a good opportunity. It has moved from the professional building to Pummel Hall. That is a fabulous building. Sun Villa and Blair Shannon Dining Hall have been renovated, and we completed the first stage of the renovation of Meyer Library, and that doesn't list all of the construction projects. These new and renovated buildings will improve teaching, learning, recruiting, and the student experience and raise our profile as a university. I think Frank will highlight some of the academic achievements in his talk, but I think you will agree that this was truly an extraordinarily good year in the life of our university, and it demonstrates that we have a passion for excellence. So that's where we were last year to where we are now. So let me pivot. Where do we go from here? First, I think we need to fully implement the new initiatives and learn how to best use our new facilities. For example, The O'Reilly Center will have a free clinic we need to bring online, and there will be many obstacles and challenges to implementing that program. I think Frank will talk a little bit about that in a minute. And second, we need to figure out our future together. In other words, we need to do some strategic planning. Many questions were identified last year during the visioning process that many of you participated in. Questions like, what new programs should be started? Or what existing programs should be expanded to meet the demand and needs of our region? What new initiatives should we begin? What changes, if any, should be made to our academic organization? Where can our limited new resources best be used? What colleges or units should receive new faculty and staff lines? How can we truly become a more inclusive community, a global community, and many others? In short, Frank and I view this primarily as a planning year. We have already begun that process by completing a year of visioning, which involved a steering committee, 6 task forces, and almost 200 people, and which resulted in a report entitled The Missouri State University Vision, Our Passion for Excellence. I hope you read it. I know many of you didn't. If you haven't, it's still available online. One of my Clif's notes linked to it earlier in the semester, and it has its own web page. I do want to highlight the 5 assumptions and 5 guiding principles that were consensus statements that came out of that report, because they're going to be the foundation upon which we build the next long-range plan. And so, here are 5 assumptions. Think about them. They're on the chart, or they're on the board here. The rate of change will continue to accelerate. I mean, if we think about our lives, I think we know that is true. Let me read a piece of the paper. Change will remain constant, but the rate of change will accelerate exponentially, driven in large part by advances in technology. Organizations will be required to adapt so they not only survive but thrive. Good organizations will add programs and functions to deal with change. Great organizations will not only add what is needed but also excel in planned abandonment, eliminating programs and services that have outlived their usefulness. 2, competition will intensify. The knowledge age will continue, so education and training will remain essential. We know that 2/3 of all new jobs are going to require at least a bachelor's level degree. We remain and we will become ever more important, but we're not going to be the only provider. This fact will attract additional providers into the higher education marketplace and cause some existing institutions to expand their reach with new programs and especially with online delivery. We had our annual meeting with the OTC administration today. They told us this morning already more of their online students are moving to places like Western Governors University as opposed to the online version of Missouri State. That's something we're going to have to recognize and deal with. 3, there will be changes in demographics, and the majority of those changes will benefit us. We shouldn't be afraid of them. The population of the United States will continue to become more diverse over the next 10 years. It is happening, clearly has already happened along both coasts and all throughout the South. It is coming to the Midwest. We need to embrace that, but it has implications for us as our student body changes, and ultimately the composition of our faculty and staff changes and how we deliver courses and the experience many of these first-generation students bring to college. We have to be cognizant of that. 4, cost will matter to Missouri State students. I'm going to read a paragraph here. Containing cost while offering high-quality programs at both the undergraduate and graduate level, providing 21st century facilities, and hiring and retaining talented faculty and staff who are compensated appropriately will be a balancing act. Absolutely, because principle number 5 is state appropriations remain unpredictable. Lots of challenges there coming, but we've identified them, and we're going to be working to deal with them. Our 6 principles are all on the board now. Student success is priority number 1. We can't ever lose track of that as we deal with all of the challenges around us. But attracting and retaining talented employees is paramount. Continuous improvement towards excellence is the goal. Our statewide mission in public affairs remains important. Partnerships and allies will be key. A great example there is we're working with Missouri S&T now on potentially adding a 3rd engineering program. It is so much more efficient and less expensive to collaborate with S&T to add a new program than to start one of our own. And so we have to recognize that. We have to be willing to embrace that. There are partners out there that want to work with us, both at our level, at the community college level, and others, and we need to embrace that. And then finally, organizational agility is vital. Those consensus principles and assumptions will impact each of the 6 areas we are going to focus on in our long-range plan. Those 6 areas are on the board. These are the same 6 areas that we had task force working on for a year, so we already have a good foundation to build upon. The areas are academic profile, student experience, diversity, globalization, infrastructure, and funding. So, the work continues. We've transitioned now from the visioning piece into the work of the long-range plan. We have put together a long-range plan steering committee to lead the effort to determine how these assumptions and principles relate to these 6 areas. Our chair is Dean Gloria Galenas, and there are 12 members of that committee. And their smiling faces are on the board. The steering committee reports to an oversight group of 3. That would be Frank, Dr. Cisco, and me. They are currently working to revise the mission statement, create a vision statement, and identify important campus values. They will report their work to the board in 2 weeks, and next week that report will go out in my Clif Note, and so I would encourage you to read that. We've given you a little preview here of where we are on the draft mission statement. So read this with me. Missouri State University is a comprehensive institution offering undergraduate and graduate programs, including the professional doctorate. The university educates global citizen scholars committed to public affairs. It's not done. The board hadn't seen that yet. You may can improve it. You may not like it at all. One of the things it does, since we last worked on the mission statement, it specifically references the doctoral programs that we now have, which we didn't have under the old mission statement. We've tried to shorten it down, which may mean we've left some things out. So we would encourage you to engage in that. We want your input on the mission statement, the vision statement, our principles. We want your input on all of the goals that we're going to be establishing. We want you involved in the process from beginning to end, and that involvement can begin next week when you give us your thoughts on the material that our group has produced so far. You know, the 15 of us, this 12 on the steering committee, Dee, Frank, and I, along with the board, cannot and should not create a long-range plan by ourselves. We all have a stake in deciding what we want our university to be in the next decade. And so my challenge to you is to become involved in the process, weigh in on how we jump the next curb, build on the success and momentum of the last 4 years, and continue to strive towards excellence. And there I'm going to stop. And I made it within my 20 minutes. And so if people have questions now that either they have handed in or have been tweeted in or whatever live stream is to get questions in. Suzanne, do we have any questions?
We do? Okay.
All right, fire away.
How will the long-range plan be used by the administration?
So, you know, our last long-range plan literally had dozens of objectives and hundreds of tasks that were laid out at the beginning that we were all going to do. We're taking a different approach this year. I think the goal in each area is to have 3 or 4 or at most 5 major goals that are pretty high-level goals. And so for diversity, for example, a goal might be to improve the campus climate. And then each college, each division would take those overall goals and see in their units how they could advance that. You know, what in the student affairs units could they do in that regard? What could each college do in that regard? What does financial services need to do in that regard? Some goals may not apply to everyone, but the idea is that we're all working together towards major goals and that each unit would need to identify what pieces of that they can contribute to. And so that's why it's really important that this be a consensus document so that you're not seeing a goal for the first time a year from now and trying to figure out, well, that doesn't apply to me. Well, I don't agree with that. And so to try to work together so that when we get it all prepared and the board approves it, that there's excitement about us working together to advance our objectives.
The next question, I think you answered a little bit, but what are some ways faculty and staff can be a part of the long-range planning process?
You know, so obviously we've talked about a way as things go out electronically for you to engage and respond to that, and we really do want you to do that. The steering committee will accumulate all of those comments. We also anticipate going to major groups, faculty senate, staff senate, departments, and members of the steering committee getting input on particular drafts or ideas that they have. We'll certainly hold at least one town meeting before we're done. And so, again, we hope there'll be multiple ways that people can give input. We certainly want our students to have input through these same processes, and I would anticipate we would be talking to Student Government Association and other student groups all throughout as we work on this. All right, anything else, or are we?
I think we're good.
All right, we got a question on a card.
What do you see as the students' role in shaping our future?
So students have to be engaged in this. They, you know, in the business world, they would be called our customers or our clients. They have a stake in this. They want to graduate from here with the correct, you know, with skills and the ability to lead both productive and engaged lives as well as be employed. And so students are critical to this. We want students engaged all along the process. They're not on the steering committee because the steering committee is really a writing committee. It is a committee that's out to seek input. But please don't let that say we don't want students involved. We want student input all along the process. Yesterday, Dee and I and several others met with a student who had a proposal on a new academic program. And we said, well, that's interesting. Let's get that submitted to the group. It needs to be in the hopper as the academic group talks about what focus should we have on expanding new academic programs. So clearly, student engagement is critical. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think our last one. Can you talk, we said students are priority one. Could you talk about some metrics that might be used to measure student success?
Yeah, you know, so the metrics we use now, at least in part, and if I miss some, Frank, help me on this. Obviously, retention rate tells us if students liked their, you know, we measure first to second year retention. That's a critical metric. We measure 4- and 6-year graduation rates. We measure involvement in a variety of public affairs initiatives. We measure community engagement and high-level experiences like internships, study-away trips, etc. Anything I'm leaving out, Frank? We measure licensure on lots of programs, from education to health to accounting, et cetera. So, if we look at our key performance indicators, there are lots of metrics where we are measuring student success. I would tell you our retention rate is, even though we are, as a metropolitan university, we're kind of right at that 2/3 point, we would like a higher retention rate. It's about 75%. We ought to probably be in the 80% range. We have work to be done there. Our graduation rates, 6-year rate's about 55%. We have work to be done there. Our licensure rates have been extraordinarily good. The teacher tests, however, have been completely changed, and will be challenging to continue to have the rates that we've had, not because our students aren't smart enough to pass the test, but because they're being tested on things they didn't know they had to learn, which is challenging. But we'll get that. We'll figure that out. And so those are the metrics we use now. We're certainly open to other metrics as well as we go forward. So with that, again, if there were questions you didn't get to ask, we're going to have stand up and ask your question at the end. But now I'm going to turn it over to Frank to talk about our academic achievements in the last year, and then to focus on the HLC visit, which is next week. Frank?
Thank you, Clif. As I was sitting there the last 20 minutes, I reflected on an old phrase that all of you know, that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And this university is 110 years old, and I guess I wanted to open up that concept that I feel very fortunate to be here, to be at this point in time, to have had a foundation history of people that wanted education for the future generations, and here we are. So now our challenge is to go forward in that regard. And you've already seen this. Whoops, already I jumped one. The questioning part is the same avenues, but the basic ideas that I want to focus on are in this one slide. And I want to continue the look ahead projection that Clif had in the last half of his talk, the visioning and the long-range plan. There are a number of things we're going to do this year, some of which have started, some of which we're engaged in, that will be critical to our future, because long-range plans don't just happen one year and then you wait 5 years. They're in process at all times. And I want to illustrate that we have a dynamic curriculum, and we have been meeting those kind of challenges. There are things we are doing that will raise our visibility and can do more than we have now going. We want to capitalize on all opportunities, and certainly meeting challenges is something we do every day, but we do it in a larger sense every year. And I don't want to leave out the idea that our basic teaching and our research that we do ongoing is of no value. Certainly it is, but it's often as we work on the fringe of things that we move forward into the future. And on the big picture items for opportunities and challenges, Clif has already mentioned retention. We're always concerned with that, but I haven't told Clif this, but we have good news on the first item up there. For this year anyway, it appears our retention of last year's freshmen will be about 78%. Now, all of you that want to take credit for that, remember there's another year that comes afterward. But it is a nice jump to have, and we hope to build on that for into the future. We're also concerned about retention into future years for those students, and looking at our most recent cohort that started 6 years ago, our 6-year retention is down a little bit from what Clif quoted. So we have work to do. On the long-term, big picture challenges, you've had time to look at them. We continually are challenged in accreditation to measure student learning. We know we have transfer student issues where we're not giving enough attention. That's one of the major goals for the year. We know that by the end of this year, we got to figure out our 6th performance measure of how we better keep track of where our graduates go. And certainly there's always that challenge. Are we doing, not just in the discipline, but what employers care for, but all the other soft skills, if you will, of what is needed? Now, some of the things that we have been doing will probably continue, and one of those is online education. Our online education has been voted on by the students to be a needed part of the spectrum. And so in online education, last summer, we had essentially 43% of our student credit hours generated. If you added in I-courses and a few of those things, you get to about 50%. At the same time, this fall, we're at 11% on online. And so when the year is summarized, we'll be up to maybe around 12, I would guess, when the year is summarized. And you can see the number of programs. But many of our online classes are not in programs, or students are not taking a full program. They're just doing that as part of their matrix or their spectrum that they're handling. We have tried to reach out as an institution in a different sort of online way, the massive open online courses. And you know, the last year we did 3 of those. We focused only on the Ozarks, and last year we had 15,000 people that experimented with them. Now, I think that raises the visibility of the university and increases the awareness, and this year we're going to, in about 2 weeks, open up another one of those, October 19th, as I remember. Yes, and it's the Civil War in Missouri. So sign up. Now I'm going to turn my attention to try to pick out, I have 3 things I wanted to mention that are, again, a little on the fringe. They're not the day-to-day teaching, but things that our School of Agriculture and our 6 colleges are engaged in that's going to make a difference for the future and something to further build on. In the School of Agriculture, we've had the most rapid percentage growth of any discipline for the last 3 years. And in that school, one of the areas that has had growth is the graduate area, and they are working on a new graduate degree and should submit it to the curricular process. A second item in the School of Agriculture I thought worth mentioning is that they're increasing their involvement in what I'm going to call globalization kinds of things. For a number of years, they've been sending a few students from here over to China and working in the viticulture and enology area over there on a summer term. But we have now on campus 60 students from Nenshaw University who will be here for the year. And I couldn't get them all in the picture, but you know, half of them are there, and the other half are on the edges. So just remember they're there. Those students, if all goes well, will have a good experience here this year, but it'll be a challenge for our ag school. And if all goes well, they'll go home and finish their degree and come back and become graduate students here. That's the discussion going on right now. Finally, the last thing is a VESTA grant that we have had for about a dozen years. This will be $13 million that has come in through that grant operation. And VESTA stands for Viticulture and Enology Science and Technology Alliance. Wow, I didn't think I'd remember that. But the VESTA grant goes along with workforce development in viticulture and enology, where we are a leading university in terms of our research and our genetic application in viticulture. The College of Arts and Letters, again, there are things in our dynamic curriculum that ought to be mentioned. This year we have our first students, 13 of them, in the interdisciplinary, so to speak, program because it involves more than modern language. It involves the English department, and it's the Master of Second Language Acquisition. For those of you who are thinking how we fit into globalization environment, I think this is another ideal fit. The Modern Classical Language Department is also the leader on this campus in looking at how their students can be better served by credit by assessment, nationally called sometimes credit for prior learning. And so they have a $100,000 grant. They're working on refining their processes. They've already shown it to be a successful thing. And the last one, most of you haven't heard yet, but for the last 10 years, we've been a home for the Ozark Writing Project. The Ozark Writing Project now, I'm going to say took over, but that's not the right words. They integrated in now the Kansas City area writing project. And by so doing, we now will have our name in front of a number of teachers there, and theoretically, we should be able to recruit better through those teachers, and those teachers may come here for graduate coursework as well. Further, it added $100,000 to the Ozark Writing Project budget this year, which is a little less than $500,000. The College of Business, we all know, is doing great things. Their enrollment is the highest of record, I believe. And in that process, we know that they are moving into new niches and exploring areas that have not been served in the past. So this year, we have our first students, around 20, in the Masters for Cybersecurity. And there's a certificate that goes along with that. And the public accounting track is being developed in the Master of Accountancy. The advancement in the second note there is pictured on the left, where we think it might look in the end as we develop a laboratory for students to get real world simulated experience on trading floor. I think they should have got that before this last 3 or 4 weeks in the stock market, but in any case, it should be a help in the longer term for all of us. The enrollment picture in the College of Business is causing some challenges, and it is other places on campus as well, but particularly in the areas of finance and our online MBA classes. The fact we have 6 EMBA cohorts that will have been here through the year, it puts some stresses out there, and they're accommodating things well. But I want to add to that, particularly on the last unit, we're very proud to have those 6 EMBA classes, and we're very pleased that our online enrollment fills up in the MBA. And I've got to get Kent Reagan to do better on finances, because our finance, we need more students in there, and he just can't find all the ones that he would like. No, that's the biggest area of growth right now. The College of Education, right now, nationwide, there's a lot of rethinking of education. And it's not all clear what the future will be, but we have a new program in Child Life, a master's program that has 4 options. And one of those options has the name Child Life in it, and that is to prepare people through their education process to work in health areas, hospitals, where we have family trauma, child trauma, which is a new dimension we've never explored before. We have 2 new graduate degrees that are site-based degrees, and we have 9 students in NICSA that are enrolled in those programs. This is the idea of having your program where you keep the teacher teaching and make a close relationship with that degree and what they are doing in the classroom. As we rethink education, this is one of the directions. And finally, I think a highlight is in the educational leadership area, where we have at least experimented already with a national curriculum that we will be using as part of the graduate degree. It has the abbreviation MILE, and you can see the name on the screen. And if all goes well, we can be the leader, and the state will adopt quite a bit of this curriculum. College of Human Services, we've obviously had great growth in that college over the years. We add to that growth now with our additional outreach into the community as we participate in the MSU Care, which is the clinic for our less privileged folks to be cared for to the best we can. And Clif has already mentioned this, but I will go on to say that this will further integrate us into the community more than perhaps anything we've done for 10 years. And why are we doing it? That's one of the reasons, but a major reason as well, this provides kind of hands-on opportunities for our students. We're starting out with those in nursing and physician's assistant. Perhaps in the future, more of our students will be involved in that clinic. We have our new occupational therapy program with 23 students. I don't think you need to say any more. It was in demand. Our doctorate of nurse anesthesia practice is a fourth doctorate for us. This program is already started. 15 students in what I call the entry-level program that goes to the doctorate, and they have 21 accepted for the certified registered nurse anesthesia students who are going to go part-time and eventually get to be a doctorate. Now, there are many things more in all these slides I could have said, but these are ones I picked out as, points of pride that give us great visibility. Our College of Humanities and Public Affairs, last year we started the Center for Community Engagement. This college was in partnership with the Provost office. Mike Stout has been developing things, particularly in the way of community red flag issues, where he's done multiple surveys and asked for recommendations. Now, he's also written several grants, and that's going to be critical to our future to have that grant funding help us maintain this operation. Our Defense and Strategic Studies Department has been the growth area of graduate education in recent time in this college, and part of that is due to collaboration with the National Defense University, and part of it now is going to extend, if the talks go well, to bringing some courses into Fort Leonard Wood. And we hope that will, matriculate into an absolute happening by the end of the year. I put as my third item here the fact that this college leads once again for the past year in the publication of books. And I'm a journal publishing myself, but books are nice too, and the covers of those give us some idea. This is 6 of the 9 books that were published, give us some idea of the breadth of outreach we have across the world, because you see everything from, conflict situations in foreign countries. I thought I would contrast that with peace related to the Bible, and then I remembered my Bible a little better, because there was a lot of conflict there as well. And you can see also Africa is in one of the titles, Nigeria is in another one, which is, of course, part of that continent. Our people are reaching out well, and I put it on here also as a look to the future. And wherever Vic is, we want 10 next year, Vic. College of Natural and Applied Science, the 3 items I picked out here, we started last year with having some of our physics faculty and students moved into the 4th floor of the Jordan Valley Innovation Center, and that is giving them greater access to research instrumentation and the technology of associated companies in JVIC. We think that the grant activity of that group should increase and be able to make it more self-supporting. Since the CNAS faculty have produced about half the grant proposals in the last year, we have some confidence that the grant writing is going to be successful to help this be an ongoing venture. Our computer science department is adding a new track in their current undergraduate major that should give some additional flexibility to their graduates in what kind of jobs they can take. And finally, I thought it worth mentioning that we have a group of 18 students from Qingdao University, which is a second time we've had those students who are studying biotechnology at our university for the year, and then they will return. We also raise the profile of the university in ways that go beyond academic departments and into a lot of other areas. I thought that if we look at the cross-section of that, one thing was worth mentioning is how we're showing that out in our Mind's Eye publication. That was mailed out this week, and I assume some of you have gotten it and some of you haven't gotten it and will so in a day or two. But in Mind's Eye, 3rd edition, we have 16 faculty that are featured, and I hope you'll take the time to read about what those faculty are doing, and of course we'll have a different group next year. In terms of over across the university type of student research, I put this in because this will be a topic for the next Board of Governors meeting, and we have 1,775 undergraduate students this fall who are engaged in research based on a class that at least 1/3 of the grade is from research or an individualized program. That's a lot. That's a lot. And just to reflect my graduate background, we have about 150 theses again the last year, which is pretty consistent for prior years as well. A lot of things matter in terms of efficiency so that we do meet the challenges of doing a lot of things Clif mentioned, but not always having the resources desired. Well, we now have our curricular process online, and I thought Dr. Self should be recognized for being a spearhead of that. But I also want to point out, like all of the things mentioned, it was a group effort. There were many other people involved as well. We've had a robust degree audit system now just on the verge, goes out October 5, I think, to start. Nathan Hoff and a number of other people, Don behind a lot of that, and we thank them. We know we're going to like it. If you look down the line at a few other things, you see that some are still under review. Our way we hire and the way we have certain human resources process are being reviewed. Outcomes are not there, but it's part of our year's endeavor. Efficiency matters in other ways, and we are looking at possibility across the university of where we can consolidate some committees because we know there are others we're going to have to start. This came out of the Administrative Council retreat for us to take a look at things. Here's just a couple of examples of what we might be able to consolidate. The first one of those, we're pretty sure we can do the scholarship committee into enrollment management, especially since it hasn't met for 2 or 3 years. We know that we have challenges in all cases because people are invested in those committees, but in reality, if something doesn't work out, we'll back up and try it again. We're going to try some consolidation. Finally, I want to spend a few minutes here, and it's not the whole talk, but the Higher Learning Commission is, of course, our umbrella accreditation body. It accredits the whole university, not just the academic side. We've been accredited 100 years for this and its forerunner, named accreditation group, and we expect to be accredited again. That's the positive we want to expect. However, our work is not done in the sense of our involvement while our site visitors are here. And I wanted to spend a couple of moments on why do we even seek accreditation? Well, this one, our university wouldn't exist if we didn't have it. Now, but there are other reasons as well. One of those is that it's one indicator of our quality. Another is that it gives us some stimulation for self-improvement and measurement of where we're going. And if you look at the other possibilities, the list could be much longer, but recognition is important here. Before I leave that, we are accredited by over 30 other organizations, but all of them come under this accreditation. I also note that we did a look at this, and 50% roughly of all of our students in a major, both graduate and undergraduate, are in some type of specialized accredited program. I think that's a pretty good statistic to know. We have open sessions next week on Monday and Tuesday where everybody's invited. Part of the assurance process that Tammy Yonke spearheaded, writing the document for, gaining the information, and Tammy, we thank you a whole lot. We thank you a whole lot. Thank you. Part of that was to defend, if you will, how we're doing in 5 areas of criterion. One is mission, and the second I kind of lump into integrity. It's a little more fancy title. But the open session for us to react to questions that our site visitors may have on these 2 topics will be at 10 o'clock Monday morning in this venue. Please show up. Give yourself some opportunity to interact with the site visitors. Some of the questions they might ask, of course, will cause you to duck your head, but I hope most of the time you can look forward and say, yeah, I know our mission. Here's how I see it expressed every day. I know what we do for integrity and ethical conduct, and you can give examples. A second open forum will cover criterions 4 and 5, 3 and 4. Both are about student learning and teaching. And if you look at the two separate titles, it's not real important that you distinguish between those two areas. It's probably where every faculty member can go in, though, and give a good representation of the university, because you are the ones doing the teaching. You are the ones helping the students get to the learning process. And, you know, we would like to have good representation. You can explain how professional development has helped you. You are the ones that can probably assure that we are represented well to the site visitors. A fifth one, Steve Folkart's got to do all this one on the financial side, but Clif's got to do the planning side. I'm just kidding. It turns out that we are right in the middle of an opportunity here for this one, because we have our planning and our visioning processes that have been going, and certainly we could be able to answer this well and should. This is on Tuesday at 9 o'clock. Please attend. We also have several of things that are called focused open areas, and these are where the site visitors have maybe a little more exploring they want to do with us. And for example, they may be thinking that we still have more work to do in some of these areas, although that's not a foregone conclusion. But diversity and the bottom one, faculty development evaluation, are open to everyone. The middle one is for department heads and deans, and I hope that everyone will show up there. Finally, building on that idea that accreditation is a quality insurance program, we have several accreditations, 2 site visits this year, one in dietetics and one in the Doctor of Nurse Anesthesia practice, and several people preparing. We also do program review for areas that are not undergoing accreditation, and we have 8 program reviews scheduled for this year. So those people are very busy. And you know, this tries to tie in, or what I intended to, is it's another way we evaluate ourselves in the accreditation type process.
And thank all of you for coming, and let's go continue to do great things. Go Bears.